seminary that could, Hood Theological Seminary, and we could not continue to keep going on were it not for the relationship that the seminary has had with First Presbyterian Church. The story of that relationship, the modern story of that relationship, I think begins with the friendship that your pastor, Reverend Dr. Bob Lewis, had with our former president, Albert Hamer. And the friendship that they forged brought our two institutions together. And thanks to organizations within this church like the Every Man's Bible Class, they've invited faculty from Hood Seminary to teach and strengthen the ties that bind our two institutions together. And a number of you have sat on the Hood Seminary Board of Trustees, Dyke Messenger and Tony Almeida and Sarah Cook and others here in this room who I'm sorry if I've overlooked you, but I want to thank you so much for your support of the seminary and all that it has meant to us. We couldn't keep going on without you, and so we really appreciate it. And so it's my pleasure to be here today to try to give something back of value to you in exchange for all you've done for Hood Seminary. Today I'd like to talk about resurrection. And I'd like to talk in particular about what resurrection meant in the context of the first century. That time in which, as the witnesses tell us today, that someone got out of the tomb. Someone, a dead man, got up because he was given new life by God. And that this event has made all the difference in the world. But I think 21st century Christians today really can't have a hard time articulating what it is, what the difference is that was made by that event. We know that we're supposed to believe in resurrection. We affirm it in the creeds, but I think a lot of us are unsure about what it really means, what the implications are of this event. And I don't think it's your fault if you feel that way, because I think the church has done a terrible job of educating people about what the resurrection means. And that fault then goes back, I think, to the seminaries. The seminaries don't really do a good job, I don't think, of teaching the new pastors in training about resurrection. So I'd like to try to do some work in that regard to shore up our knowledge base of what's supposed to be the center of our faith. The testimony is that a Galilean man named Yeshua was given new life by God. He was dead, buried in the tomb. So we're not talking about a resuscitation. We're talking about a resurrection. And a resurrection would be, by definition, that it's only something that God could do. Because we don't have the power to give a dead body new life. If that event took place, it would have been an act of God, not an act of paramedics with defibrillators or CPR expertise. I read a theologian that wrote that if we were to get rid of Christmas, we would lose 2 chapters of the New Testament. If we were to get rid of Easter, we would lose the entire New Testament. And that's striking because in the life of contemporary mainline Protestant churches, Easter is a far bigger deal, or Christmas is a far bigger deal than Easter. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's easier for us to get our minds around Christmas than Easter. Maybe we're more comfortable with a little baby than we are with a grown man who has come back from the dead. That's scary, that's weird, that's strange, and maybe there's a psychological reason culturally why we've gravitated towards Christmas and maybe are unsure about what to do with Easter. The liturgical calendar states that there are 6 Sundays of Easter, but we act as if Easter is over on the first Sunday of Easter. And it's sort of the relief that comes from all the busy activity of Lent. And we're so exhausted from Lent, which is ironic because Lent is supposed to be a time of rest and reflection and contemplation, but we're so exhausted by the time we get over Lent, we're almost relieved that Easter is here, and Easter's function is to deliver us from the tyranny of Lent. And then we go on our business through summer vacations and beach vacations, and we never stop to really sit with what Easter is supposedly all about. But it's the center of the New Testament, and without Easter, the New Testament doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work. So let's talk a bit about what news about the resurrection of this man named Yeshua. And we call him Jesus today because the Greek Jesus is the Greek rendering of his Hebrew name Yeshua. And the English rendering of the Greek Jesus is Jesus. But there's a Jewish man named Yeshua who was said to have gotten up on the third day. And to understand what this would have meant to people in the first century, we first have to come to terms with the fact that resurrection is not a Christian idea. It's a Jewish idea. It's not an idea that originates in the first century. It has a long conceptual history prior to the first century, because it emerges during what scholars of Judaism call the Second Temple period of Israel's history. The First Temple period starts at the middle of the 10th century BCE when Solomon builds the First Temple, and it comes to its conclusion at 587 BC when the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem and burned down the First Temple. Many of the Israelites then go into exile in Babylon following their defeat at the hands of the Babylonians. And then they are released when the Persians conquer the Babylonians. And the Persians allow those Jews who are in exile in Babylon to go back home to Jerusalem. And that takes place in 516 BCE. And when they go back, they build the Second Temple. And that Second Temple lasts until 70 AD, when the Romans then burned down that Second Temple during the First Roman-Jewish War. So resurrection is an idea that emerges in this Second Temple period of Israel's history. Now why and how it emerges during that particular time, that's a story for another presentation. Maybe another day we'll get into that. But I want to limit myself to describing what resurrection would have meant to a Jew during the Second Temple period. Resurrection would have been synonymous with maybe what we would refer to today as Judgment Day. It named that day when Yahweh's hidden sovereignty over the creation would become visible, would be made manifest. When the whole world, not just Israel, would know that Yahweh was in charge of the creation. We see glimpses of this in Matthew chapter 25. Jesus is talking like a good Second Temple Jew when he talks about this day of judgment, when the goats and the sheep will be separated. He's referring to this resurrection judgment day that was in the cultural theological air at the time. Resurrection was associated with judgment, and that judgment was necessary because Yahweh had to deal with all the injustices and disorder that had taken place up until that time if creation was to be set right. Judgment had to be the door through which the new world would be ushered in. There cannot be any peace unless justice and order is first restored. And so that concept of resurrection, that day when God's justice would be finally established on earth as in heaven, is associated with resurrection. Resurrection would not take place in some skybox up in the heavens. Resurrection was an event that a second temple Jew would be looking for in this world. Resurrection would happen here and now, in this time-space continuum. It would not happen in some satellite colony up in the ethereal heavens. And what they thought about resurrection was it was something that was going to happen to everybody all at once at the same time. Everyone who had ever lived would be resurrected and brought back to stand in judgment before Yahweh. So it was something that was going to happen to the entire human race, all on the same day, all at once. And Israel was looking forward to this day because they thought it was the day that they would be vindicated by Yahweh, that they would be rewarded for their faithfulness. And all the other Gentile nations that had stuck to them all these years, that was the day when those nations would get theirs, and all would be made right. Resurrection was a controversial idea. It was not a mainstream idea among Second Temple Jews. It was a radical new theology. That's what it was perceived to be at the time. It messed with a lot of the established Jewish teachings about life after death. The dominant life after death theory for Judaism at that time was when you died, you go to this place called Sheol. And Sheol was kind of a weird, nebulous, murky kind of place. It was not like hell, the way hell is described in medieval Christianity, this place of torment and suffering. It was sort of, imagine, I guess, spending your entire afterlife at the Department of Motor Vehicles. It was kind of boring. Nothing really bad and nothing really good would happen. You just kind of sit there in this sort of frozen state, kind of waiting around. And you don't really know what you're waiting around for. You just kind of find yourself in this waiting room and you think to yourself, well, I wonder what's going on with the living. I wonder what they're doing these days. I sure wish I was among them right now because this place is really boring. So you had Sheol. And the other life after death theory for Jews was not really a life after death theory. It was this notion that you would just live on through your children and your grandchildren. Your legacy would continue through them, and they would remember your name, and your family would do you proud, and you would live on through their accomplishments. You would live on their memories, but you would really cease to exist, except insofar as your line continued. So resurrection was a really weird idea to introduce into the discussion at the time. Only a subset of Jews believed in it. Sadducees, for instance, did not affirm resurrection. You see this in the New Testament. They're kind of wisecracking with Jesus. They're telling the story about this woman who had married 7 brothers all in a row, after each one died, and they joking around with Jesus saying, well, whose wife is she going to be in the resurrection? That's not a serious question. They're poking fun at the notion of resurrection because they don't buy it. But Jesus' response indicates that Jesus is one of those Jews who does believe in resurrection, in this particular afterlife theory. And he doesn't seem to appreciate the sarcasm and the joking there of the Sadducees. Essenes, the weird Jews who lived out like monks in the desert, they are reported not to have believed in resurrection. The zealots may or may not have believed in it. It was only a subset of Pharisees who believed in this concept of resurrection. Not all the Pharisees did. So, with that background in mind, I want us to imagine that you are a Second Temple Jew in the first century, and you have come to hear reports that a radical, reforming Jewish rabbi from Galilee has been given new life by God. What would go through your mind at the time? What would you be thinking about if you received that news? Well, you could be like some who say, that's completely ridiculous. On the face, that's completely ridiculous. Because they wouldn't believe in resurrection to begin with. So it can't be true. That's a made-up story by these Jewish resurrection believers who are trying to promote their particular afterlife doctrine. If you were to hear it, though, and if you were to believe in it, the first thing that would come to your mind is that resurrection theory has been validated. That resurrection theory has been proved true. It had a lot of naysayers, had a lot of doubters, but the fact that this rabbi has been given new life, this affirms that resurrection is true. This afterlife theory is true. Then the second thing that would go through your mind is, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. We were all supposed to be raised together on the same day at the same time. We didn't expect for one person to get out ahead of the general resurrection in advance of the rest of us. It was supposed to go down all at once. And now we hear a report that someone got out ahead of the general resurrection, and you start thinking to yourself, that is not what I expected. That's not what I anticipated. What in the world is God up to in giving someone the gift of resurrection prior to us all having gotten it? The way I describe it to my students is, when you're making popcorn on the stove or in the microwave, the resurrection of Jesus is that first kernel that pops. It's that first kernel that pops, but you're waiting for all the other kernels to pop. And he is the one who got popped in advance of everybody else. But it was not supposed to happen like this. And so you start to ask yourself the question, why did God decide to do this? Resurrection as an event, you realize, has now been split into two. There's the first phase, which is Jesus' resurrection in advance of everybody else, and then we're still waiting for this big shebang general resurrection that's going to happen to everybody at the end of time. So the question becomes, what is God doing here by doing it this way? And you might ask yourself, well, what time is it? What time is it now? A resurrected body is a body of the future. It's a body that's not supposed to be here until the future comes. But now a body from the future, a resurrected body, has appeared on the scene in the midst of the present. It's like the future has invaded the present time through the body of this one person. And you would be confused about what time is it? Is it Judgment Day now? Is this the event through which God set the world right? And if God did, why are the Romans still in charge? And why is there still oppression? And why are things still seemingly not right? What's going on here? letters of Paul are important, and it's a good thing that they were included in the New Testament, because the letters of Paul give us access in real time to a first century Jew trying to wrestle with these very questions. What time is it? What does it mean that one person got out ahead of the general resurrection? And it's Paul, a first century Pharisee, Second Temple Jew, who's going to do the intellectual work of trying to think through this stuff. And even he's not sure what to make of it. And he writes one letter to one church, and he sends it, and then he writes a second letter to another church, and he revises a little bit what he wrote to the other church. He's trying to figure it out himself. And he's trying to make sense of it in context of these communities that he has founded throughout the ancient world that have arisen, he thinks, because of the resurrection of this man, Jesus. Paul says, well, it appears that the present time has been invaded by the future. God has given us a preview of future attractions through the resurrection of this one person. God has given us a window onto the future, what future reality will look like. The future has stepped out from the future and invaded the present to give those of us in the present a glimpse onto it. And Paul says, you know what? This is good news, because this preview of the future shows us that we don't have to be afraid of the future. The future is not wrathful. The future is not scary. This future is not violent, because the body of the future comes to the present and says, peace be with you. Peace be with you. And I'm not here to seek revenge for what you did to me, crucifying me outside the walls of the city of Jerusalem. I have come to bring peace, not vengeance or retribution. So Paul says, this is really good news, because now we know we don't have to be afraid or anxious about the future. And when human beings get afraid or anxious about the future, human beings start to do terrible and destructive things. Genocides take place when human beings are afraid of the future. Oppression takes place when human beings are afraid of the future. And Paul says we don't have to play that game anymore, because we know the future has good things in store. The future is going to be pervaded by God's peace and God's justice. We can live lives of confidence, assurance, and courage now that we know that this is true. And we know it's true because we've seen the body of the future, Jesus Christ. Second thing Paul is thinking about is this preview of the future is not like a trailer in the movie theater where you see a 30-second or a minute clip of a movie that's going to come out this summer, and then the trailer goes off the screen and there's another trailer, and you kind of forget about the trailer once its time on the reel is over. Something about the preview of this future, that is the resurrection of Jesus, wants to set up shop in the present, wants to make its permanent home in the present. The future has arrived, and guess what? The future wants to stay and hang out. So how does the future stay and hang out in the present when the present has not yet caught up to it? And this is what Paul is trying to think through. And the answer he comes up with is the future that we saw in Jesus Christ is going to set up a permanent home in the present through a community that Paul calls the ecclesia. The ecclesia, that's a Greek term, and it means in its original Greek context, assembly. It's an assembly of people. And usually that assembly of people refers to some kind of political body in the city. Ecclesia is going to have a meeting at 5 o'clock tomorrow night to discuss garbage collection or something like that. And so the ecclesia was a political body in the Roman world. And the word we use to translate the Greek ecclesia in English is church. The church is the community, the assembly, the ecclesia, where the future reality is going to set up shop and residence in the context of the present. This community is a really weird community, says Paul. You've never seen a community like this one. Because this community doesn't base the way it does life together on present states of affairs. It's supposed to orient its life together by way of the logic of the future that's been disclosed to it through the resurrection of Christ. It is supposed to be the community of the future in advance of the future. Now, the only way we can really get our minds around this, I don't know, is to go into the world of science fiction, where we're talking about different dimensions and occupying different kind of time-space zones at the same time. But this is the challenge that faces the ecclesia, the church. In the midst of a world that's still awaiting the general resurrection, it has to live God's future now. And how does it do that? Well, the way you enter into this community, as Paul says, is through baptism. And through baptism, the person who wants to join this community has to die a kind of death. They have to be united with Christ in the death that Christ died. And when Christ died, Paul says he died to the old reality. The old reality that was resistant to God. That was resistant to God's justice, to God's peace. You have to die the kind of death to that reality, and you have to come alive to the reality of the future if you're going to be a part of this community. Because this community lives the future now. And how does a community in the present live the logic of the future in the present? Well, Paul says you don't have to think about it, because you just have to look at this community and see what's happening. In this community, people who never would have eaten at the same table together are eating together. Jews and Gentiles, sworn enemies. It was illegal for a Jew to eat with a Gentile, but in this community, Jews and Gentiles are breaking down the walls of segregation and are fellowshipping with one another. In this community, slave people and free people come together and interact as equals. Men and women out in society. Men are superior and have positions of power over against women, but not in this community. The division between men and women is being broken down in this community. Wealthy and poor people are encountering one another as equals in this community. And this work is the fact that this is happening in the first century, Paul says, this is a miracle. And the only way he can explain it is to say that the power of new life that was made available, unleashed on the creation through the resurrection of Christ, has somehow taken hold of this community, and strange things, wonderful things, weird things are happening here that we don't see anywhere else. This community doesn't have its citizenship in the present. Paul says they're politeia. They're polity. That's a term that Aristotle uses when he talks about politics. Paul says their politeia pertains to the new reality that is to come. The coming kingdom of heaven. That's where they get their marching orders from. That's how they figure out what it is that they're supposed to do. They don't look around at everybody else and say, what are they doing? They say, no, we are asking, what will we be doing in the future, and then we do it now. The community's mission is to simply live the life of the future now, and to allow all the other human communities that surround it a glimpse, a window into the future by the way that they do business together amongst themselves in this community. The anti-apartheid activist Steve Biko, he was a staunch activist and opponent of racial apartheid in South Africa, and he died after being severely beaten in 1977 by state security officers from the South African government at the time. And Biko was reported to have said that revolutions are not about implementing them. Revolutions are about preparing people in the present to live the revolution that will come one day. You don't implement a revolution. What a revolutionary does in the present is prepares people now for the revolution that is to come. And it seems to me that that's the church's job in light of the resurrection. Your job here at First Presbyterian is to prepare Salisbury for the revolution that is to come. And the way you do that is to bear witness within yourselves the power of this crazy, strange body that's appeared on the landscape of the present. And you live according to its logic, you live according to its reality, you live according to its power, and you point the way for the community that surrounds you to the revolution that is to come. And the next weeks that follow, I'm going to be talking about ways that Christians have tried to harness or draw on the power of resurrection to influence the world around them. And we're going to look at three very different ways that that has been done. And I'm looking forward to conversing with you about those three ways that follow. But I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your time and the invitation